The headlines celebrate kinetic capability. The U.S. Navy awards contracts for new hypersonic motors, and the public is conditioned to watch the skies for incoming threats. This is a strategic misdirection. The prohibitive cost of symmetric launch-on warning warfare makes it a weapon of last resort, not first strike. The missile is a decoy. The primary vector for modern conflict is not fire. It is silence. The objective is not decapitation, but paralysis. An adversary's most effective first strike will not be detected by radar. It will be the sudden systemic failure of the global data network. Over 95% of all international data and financial transactions travel through a few hundred fiber optic cables on the ocean floor. CSIS reports confirm these are highly vulnerable, often laid in plain sight. Severing these conduits is not a complex kinetic operation. It is a quiet, asymmetric act with a disproportionate effect. It is the silent vector. Simultaneously, the second vector of silence is executed in orbit. This is not the physical destruction of satellites, but blinding them. Directed energy weapons, high-powered microwave emitters, or AI-fueled cyber warfare, as highlighted by recent reports on infrastructure threats, can render GPS, communication, and reconnaissance satellites inert without creating a debris field. The eyes and ears of the state are shut. The result is the blind Leviathan, a nation-state with unparalleled military might but no sensory input. Its hypersonic arsenal sits dormant. Its carrier groups are adrift without GPS. Its markets are frozen, triggering a systemic solvency crisis. It is a giant, powerful, and utterly helpless. This is the blueprint for 21st century warfare, engineering an internal collapse by attacking external unguarded dependencies. The motive is not conquest. It is solvency. A nation-state facing a peer with overwhelming kinetic capability understands a mathematical certainty. Symmetric warfare is a zero-sum game it cannot afford to play. The cost of a single munition, the political capital required for a protracted conflict. These are liabilities that can bankrupt a regime before the first shot is even fired. This is not a failure of will. It is a calculated pivot forced by economic reality. Consider the accelerant, hypersonics. As the U.S. Navy awards Northrop contracts for new hypersonic motors, it raises the entry cost for great power conflict to an unsustainable level for most actors. The sheer price of deterrence creates a state of kinetic paralysis. When you cannot afford to engage your adversary symmetrically, you are forced to find a cheaper, more effective vector. This is the genesis of the pivot to asymmetry. CSIS analysis of Russia's strategic posture confirms this principle. A costly and unpopular war becomes the primary domestic liability. An adversary no longer needs to defeat an army. It only needs to leverage pre-existing internal fractures until the state can no longer finance its own operations. The system breaks itself. We see this dynamic globally. Protests challenging the Iranian regime create a systemic vulnerability that an external actor can exploit at a fraction of the cost of a military strike. This redefines the battlefield. Internal weakness becomes the ultimate external threat. Domestic liabilities, political schisms like the conflict over Wall Street's role in the housing crisis, or the digital vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure now being targeted by AI-fueled cyber warfare, are no longer internal matters. They are the primary attack surfaces in a modern solvency crisis. The motive is to engineer a systemic failure, forcing an opponent into a state of political and economic insolvency from which it cannot recover. It's not about winning a war. It's about making the other side too broken to fight one. The mathematical certainty of modern conflict is economic. While nation-states pour trillions into developing platforms like the hypersonic motors contracted to Northrop Grumman, the battlefield has already inverted. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, quantifies this inversion with terrifying clarity. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a balanced equation. It is an economic kill switch. This radical cost asymmetry enables what strategists call the democratization of violence. The capability to project lethal force is no longer a monopoly of states with vast treasuries. It has been decentralized, handed to non-state actors and proxy forces for the price of consumer electronics. Why engage in a symmetric kinetic war with prohibitive costs when you can achieve strategic objectives through cheaper vectors? An adversary understands this calculus. They do not need to sink a carrier fleet. They need only leverage these low-cost tools to attack the true center of gravity: your systemic liabilities. Reports that AI is fueling cyber warfare against critical infrastructure are not future threats. They are the active front. The objective is not battlefield victory, but to engineer a solvency crisis, proving that the most devastating kinetic cost is the one that targets your economy directly. The battlefield is no longer a geographic location. It is a distributed network of systemic liabilities. While defense contractors like Northrop Grumman Perfect Hypersonic Motors, making direct kinetic conflict a zero-sum game of mutual annihilation, the real war has already moved. It operates in the gray zone, the political, economic, and digital seams of any nation exhibiting instability. These are not sovereign crises. They are laboratories. Observe the Iranian protests. According to public domain intelligence, these are not merely domestic flare-ups. For an adversary, this is a live-fire exercise in mimetic warfare, a low-cost opportunity to test protocols for amplifying civil unrest and engineering political paralysis. The goal is to perfect a blueprint for systemic collapse that can be deployed elsewhere. It is a stress test of a nation's internal cohesion. Simultaneously, an eScan report confirms India's critical infrastructure is a proving ground for AI-fueled cyber warfare. This isn't random hacking. CSIS analysis confirms that state actors use such environments to refine digital attack vectors against power grids, financial systems, and logistics networks. They are calibrating the weapons that target a nation's core functionality, gauging response times, and identifying critical failure choke points with zero kinetic risk. These proxy laboratories are not confined to foreign states. Internal fractures within primary nations are monitored as passive intelligence. When a political figure declares war on Wall Street landlords, it signals a deep exploitable cleavage in the socio-economic fabric. Adversaries do not see a housing debate. They see a pre-existing condition, a vector for introducing economic accelerants to trigger a liquidity or solvency crisis. Internal weakness is the ultimate external threat, and these gray zones are where the battle plans are being written. The core protocol of nuclear deterrence is launch on warning. This doctrine, as analyzed by strategic bodies like CSIS, is not a choice. It is a mathematical necessity. It states that once early warning systems confirm an inbound strategic strike, a retaliatory launch is executed before the incoming warheads detonate. The objective is to guarantee a second strike, making a first strike a zero-sum calculation for any adversary. However, the velocity of the threat vector is accelerating. The development of new hypersonic motors, such as those contracted by the U.S. Navy, compresses the decision timeline from 30 minutes to less than 5. There is no longer time for human deliberation or multiple layers of confirmation. The entire system is predicated on the absolute integrity of its sensor data. This is the systemic liability. Adversaries recognize that the kinetic cost of defeating a nuclear power is prohibitive. The asymmetric vector is therefore not the missile, but the data it relies on. As reports from ET Edge Insights confirm, AI-fueled cyber warfare is now a primary threat to a nation's critical infrastructure. This explicitly includes the command, control, and communications network that underpins nuclear launch protocols. This creates the fog of digital war. An adversary executes a cyber attack that blinds the early warning radar. The commander sees a blank screen. Is it a system malfunction or a sophisticated attack designed to mask an inbound hypersonic strike? Waiting for confirmation guarantees annihilation. Launching risks initiating a global thermonuclear exchange based on a glitch. The doctrine forces the commander's hand. In this engineered crisis, the fear of inaction becomes the trigger. The ultimate external threat is no longer the missile in the air. It's the doubt in the code. The mathematical certainty of mutual annihilation, accelerated by hypersonic platforms, has rendered large-scale kinetic conflict a negative-sum game. Adversaries therefore pivot to asymmetric protocols. The primary vector is no longer military hardware, it is systemic liability. CSIS analysts have modeled the impact of AI-fueled cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. The calibration shot is the next logical phase. Within the next 12 months, expect a coordinated logistics data attack on a Tier 1 North American port complex. This will not be a simple blackout. It will be a data poisoning event, corrupting shipping manifests and freezing cargo clearance systems for 48 to 72 hours. The objective is not destruction, but to test the cascading failure rate of the U.S. supply chain and measure political response time amidst domestic fractures. Attribution will be impossible by design. It is a launch-on warning signal for a new era of solvency warfare.